Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Eat Sleep Arsenal Repeats podcast. I'm joined this week by the Doc. How you doing, Doc? How are you doing, Raj? Oh, I don't know why I struggled with that so much. That was a blah, 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 blah. How are you doing,
It's
Raj?
been a while. It's been a
Yeah.
while, clearly. I'm doing well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. It has been a while. We haven't recorded one of these in a number of weeks. A lot of reasons for that, schedules and personal lives and things like that. And because of that, we don't sadly have Owen or Sophie with us this evening. Yes, we send our well wishes to them both, in particular Sophie, of course. And for those that listen to the Hybrid Squad, I know that you'll be well aware with her situation right now. And we are sending her all the well wishes in the world. And if you'd like to send her a kind message, I'm sure she would very much appreciate that. Raj, it's been in these last few weeks since we were able to do a show. We've beaten City, we've drawn with Chelsea, we've beaten Seville in Seville, and remain unbeaten in the league, of course, as well, and sit joint on points with Manchester City, 2 points behind some other team that exists in the Premier League. Don't know who they are, but less said about them, the better. How do you feel about these last few weeks?
I mean, feeling pretty good overall on balance. I think. I mean, going from obviously the City win, which was huge, just for. I mean, it's so early in the season, but just from a confidence booster, right? I think that's massive for them. The Chelsea match, of course, I think the way coming back from 2-0 to win that match and potentially having a chance to win it, I thought showed a lot of resilience and adaptability. And I was always a person, I've always felt Chelsea's playing far better than their results. And so I expected a tough match, especially away. And then, of course, in my opinion, any European match on the road, especially in Spain, is very difficult. And then there was a stat put out by Squawka. I think in their history, we've only won four away matches. Yeah, now four. So, and then the way it was done was one of those matches. Being able to play that way in Europe, away in that type of environment, although there was a loud mic right next to the fans, which the whole time. And so kind of distracting, but being able to do that to me was a very, very positive side. And then, of course, like you said, still unbeaten in the league, so which is great.
Yeah, we are. And that's a really important fact of this season, that we are still in the league, at least. Obviously, we had that Lens defeat, but in the league, it was so important to keep that unbeaten record and to come from, 2 goals down in a position whereby getting a result looked bleak, to say the least, and to return in the game the way that we did was really, really, really important. So that's certainly good. But I think the Man City result was forgotten really quickly because of the Chelsea draw. And obviously the international break followed that City draw as well. But the City win. Do you feel like that's just kind of, as I say there, been kind of brushed under the carpet and as if it never even happened? Because I feel like we should be eating off of that win for months, not just, an international break.
Yeah, and I think that's just the problem when after an international break is like you kind of lose that league momentum, right? Even just like, there's that 10 days or 14 days, whatever it is, of just, no club football. So you lose some of that. I don't know if you lose momentum internally, but at least it feels like from an external perspective, right? Everyone just moves on to the next match. And that's kind of some of the negative with a big match before the international break. The positive is sometimes you can risk some players who you might not be able to risk otherwise because they have some time off, right? So there's always that give and take.
Yeah, absolutely. I, for one, thought it was a performance that was really industrial and combative and showcased a side of Arsenal that we've not seen enough, especially in those types of games. We've tried to play them in their own game and come out second best because, if we're honest, when you play at the absolute maximum, City are better than us. And sometimes at Anfield, Liverpool can be better than us. And even Old Trafford, Man United can be, believe it or not, better than us if you try and play them. But if you play savvily and you play a certain type of strategy, you can, weasel your way to a win. And certainly we managed to do that in that game. And the Chelsea result, again, was, I think, just an off day. And that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, is the allowance of off days. I know we don't like saying, oh, it's fine if you have a bad performance, because you don't want to, legitimize a bad display. But I also think there's a context to a season in which you aren't going to play brilliant week in, week out. No team does. And I include the cities and the Real Madrids of this world. Real Madrid drew against Sevilla in the same week that we beat them. Manchester City had a bad game against us and lost. We had a bad game against Chelsea, Raj, and didn't lose. And it's when you have those bad games that you need to come away without dropping all of the points on offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also felt Chelsea was trying to like the perfect storm. You had the handball decision, right? And I think, they were saying on VAR that part of that was that the ball was on net. If you saw the reverse angle, it wasn't on net. So that's part of the rationale. It didn't even make sense, regardless of whether you want to say Saliba's close enough. All right, so poor decision there. And I thought the first half was quite poor on Arsenal's end. And then second half, just as we're starting to get into the game, you have the Mudryk hit, intentional or not. like Michelle said.
It's not even a debate. It's
not even intentional.
It's the flukiest goal ever.
He's not even looking at Raya. It's just so whatever he wants to say afterwards, it doesn't matter, right? So you have a completely fluke goal. Just as we're, following second half, we tend to come out pretty well when we're down after those team talks and the team is motivated. So it was almost a perfect storm to lose a match, right? But then so able to come back from those two types of kind of, more flukier goals and still get back in the game, and then even have a chance with Eddie on a tough chance. That being said, right, to take a 3-2 lead that goes wide. I thought, of course, coming back from 2-0 in general is always great, but especially when you have two of those nights where it's not our night, right? Like that happens in football. It's just not our night. But being able to still come back in that situation, those specifics, I think especially showed a lot more of that resilience and the mentality that we've shown throughout the season.
It did. And I think resilience is certainly something that Arteta's tried to instill in this team, and never say die attitude. The amount of goals that we score within the 75th and 90 plus minute, is quite staggering. The level of, not attention to detail, but the level of commitment throughout the entire fixture is something that, Arsenal should certainly be proud of and continue to fight onwards with. And obviously the Sevilla game then on Tuesday night, Gabriel Jesus, even though he came off with an injury, which we will talk about in a little bit, both he and Martinelli stepping up on a big stage in a big stadium. I mean, Jesus in particular, the turn and, to set up Martinelli and his finish as well. Do you feel like with 3 goals in 3 Champions League games, what's stopping him from replicating that type of form in the Premier League?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, it seems like he's just one of those guys who on the biggest stage, he has that extra gear. So he just that mentality. It's hard to carry that same level of focus to each and every match, right? 38 game weeks. So that's what it seems like. And he always talks about, he's talked about multiple times about Champions League is kind of his greatest desire, right? And to play on that stage and be really good on that stage. So I think clearly he's a player who really, really puts a lot on that. And so, yeah, but it's so hard to say. It's so hard to say. But I think you can also say, when you're playing in Champions League, you also have teams for the most part that aren't as acclimated to him, right? Whereas in England, you might have teams who might be a little bit more adapted to him. Although I'm not saying he's not a bad player, but I mean, obviously he's playing poorly. But just when you have a new team who's not quite as adapted to him, is a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, without a doubt. So Jesus came off at the end of the game with a tweaked, hamstring issue.
Yeah, right.
He said that he's fine. Which I think is more willing it into existence. He was like, I'm sure it's nothing, But Isan at the Daily Mail has reported this evening actually that he didn't train today. And we will find out obviously tomorrow. Mikel Arteta will have his press conference, and an ironic tweet out that said, predicting tomorrow's presser. Reporter asks Arteta, what's the latest with Jesus? Arteta says, we have a session today. We will wait and see if he trains, which is what we know will happen. We don't have any news regarding, whether or not it's an amount of length of time that he's out, and we'll hear from Arteta tomorrow. But I suppose if you've got Sheffield United at the weekend, Raj, it's probably the best time to face a team when you might not have Jesus. And who would you be playing instead of him if he's not fit?
Yeah, I mean, to your point about Sheffield, yeah, I mean, it's a team they should be beating regardless of having Jesus or not. I think, the best option there is just still to me Eddie as the best option in my opinion. So if you can put him up top, I know everyone's clamoring for Kai to play at the 9, but I just don't see. I don't see. Yeah, no, I just don't see. I don't see Mikel. Maybe he will, but I don't see Mikel starting him at the 9. I think he's willing to start him in that midfield because he wants him to adapt to that position and then bring him off the bench in that 9 position. That's just my opinion, but we'll see. We'll see. I think, especially for Sheffield, I think he'll play Eddie. Just my guess. That's my intuition.
Yeah, I think that Eddie will probably be the player that comes in. I'd love it to be Kai that starts there. I think he should be given the opportunity to start as centre forward and get an opportunity to play nearer the goal and potentially score. It'd be great to hear the Waka Waka song in the Emirates. That's certainly something I want to hear this season. But over the course of these games as well, from Sevilla to City to Chelsea that we've been talking about, one player that's not stood out is Martin Odegaard, who looks to be going for a little bit of a rougher patch in an Arsenal shirt. I titled the video, "Is Odegaard becoming the new Saka?" in the sense of I've seen a few people say he's burnt out. He's playing too many games and that's leading to him have these performances. Do you think that's the answer to what this form is?
I don't really see any indication that he's burnt out, though. If you look at like his distance of sprints, his pressing, none of that indicates that, right? I just think right now I think this is a confidence blip. It happens to every player, right? And so I think we tend to have an overreaction to natural dips in form. So, and again, he's also adapting, to Declan being around, to a new midfield around him as well. And so there are I think the right-hand side dynamic has been off the entire season, right? I think in general. So I think it includes Martin. Saka's been great, but you can see there's that just lack of fluidity we've seen before. And we're trying to integrate new players. Like Declan's not the same type of progressive passer as say a Partey, right? And so it's a different style for Odegaard to adapt to as well, who loves to play in those pockets. So you see him dropping a little bit deeper to hit the ball. I think you see him. The one thing I would love for him to do is just move the ball on a little bit quicker, right? Rather than constantly looking, right? I think that's the key thing we've seen with him. But I think he's a guy I don't ever worry about in terms of refinding his form. Extremely high IQ guy. He works extremely hard. And even when he's not playing well, with the ball, he's going to give you a lot off the ball as well.
Yeah, he is. I think that a lot of it is to do with the inconsistency in the starting 11. I know a lot of people say it's the lack of Partey, but I've seen him play plenty of games where Partey's not been playing and he's been just as world-class and excellent. So I don't think that's necessarily a defining factor. And to be honest, if you are a world-class player, I think Odegaard is, you don't need another world-class player to perform at the top level. I think it's more to do with the inconsistencies in the 11, the how much we've shaken things up because of injury, because of tactical changes throughout the course of the first 9 games. And we've had some really challenging games. And Odegaard's quieter performances do tend to come in games in which, you go up against some of the biggest teams that have more of the ball. The Chelsea game, the Spurs game, the Manchester City game. When we weren't on the ball as much, he's a type of player that elevates your possession when you have him. And I think criticism to say that, people say that they want Odegaard to be the type of player that when things aren't going well, they want him to grab a game by the scruff of the neck and take it to the opposite. That's just not the type of player he is. And to that, I would say that I can't necessarily think of a game where Man City were really under the cosh and De Bruyne took the game by the scruff of the neck and, won it in that sense. I think they're both world-class players, but I look at them as players that elevate their team and those around them when they're doing their best stuff. And I don't think it's necessarily, if your expectation is for Odegaard to do that, I think you're probably going to be disappointed. I think there are players in the team like Jesus, with his energy, with the way in which he plays. I think there are players like Declan Rice that, without a doubt, of course, Saliba in some ways, he can compose himself at the back and give you that calmness to start playing out when things aren't going well. I think there are individuals that have those traits. I don't look at Odegaard like that, and I don't necessarily think that comparing him to a player like De Bruyne, who, I don't see grabbing gains by the scruff of the neck when things aren't going well for City and changing things like on a regular basis. There might be 1 or 2 examples in his career, sure, but none are standing out to me. You know, feel free to give me an example. I see some people are saying against Real Madrid in the Bernabeu. Okay. But like, I'm not sensing that. And in the same way, like, this is an Odegaard that scored in, you know, multiple North London derbies. This is an Odegaard that when we went 1-0 down against Man United, who was the guy that got us back into the game immediately? It was him this season when apparently he's having a bad campaign. So I don't agree with that. What would you think about that trailer thought?
No, I agree with you in Odegaard. I've always said, to me, he's a guy, there's a term, you know, a rising tide raises all ships. And that's what he is, right? And he's the type of guy who elevates everyone else's game. He's not gonna. I think there's a lot of selective attention with Odegaard. He's had some very good games as well, but you know, as an Arsenal fan, we tend to kind of hyper focus on the moments he doesn't, especially now that he's going through some negative form and some confidence. But he's a guy. I think when he's in sync with his teammates and he has that cohesion and chemistry, he's going to take everyone's game. It's cumulative, right? He's going to take everyone's game, let's say from a 7 to a 9 across the board. And so it's that cumulative effect, not just raise his own game. And so that to me is the type of player he is. But to your point, when you don't have a cohesive starting 11 or a starting 11 you're trying to integrate and have consistency, that's going to really impact his game negatively because he's such a rhythm, chemistry, cohesion player out there. And so when he doesn't have that anticipation or that understanding, you know, just right with all his teammates, I think he has it tends to his performances will fluctuate more so than other players.
I still just don't get what Odegaard has to do to convince some people of his quality. Like I see a comment, KL says Odegaard is just not good. Stop defending mediocrity. This is a guy that equaled the record for non-penalty goals in the Premier League of any midfielder in the league's history last season. Like, I don't get what he has to do for some people to convince them of his quality. The guy is world class, in my view, and can get better than he already is. You know, go on, sorry.
No, I agree with you. He's a great player. Like I said, unfortunately, we see this all the time, right? Player goes through a down stretch. Suddenly he's mediocre. He's this, that, and the other, right? A lot of recency bias comes into play. And so I think there's a lot of things. He's also the type of player where I think you see this with Kai too, where you don't see a lot of what he's doing out of possession either, right? And if you watch Odegaard, he's oftentimes directing the press, right? We talked about how effective the press is, or even though now we've been playing kind of less than a high press, just in blocks. A lot of times he's the one directing that press. Declan to some extent too, right? So he's very integral to how the squad plays with so much balance, which is critical to their success this season.
Yeah, without a doubt. So it's very. I just find it odd. You know, I find it really odd when people just refuse to see it. I think it's more stubbornness, or maybe they came out at the start of Odegaard's time at the club and weren't the biggest fan, and were very vocal with that. And now seeing him kind of mud them a little bit, they're scared to hold their hands up and say, "I got this wrong." I mean, it's fine to do that. Yeah, it's fine to be wrong about things, and a lot of people have been wrong about Martin Odegaard. That is for sure. So this weekend, then obviously there's a lot of question marks, Raj, about, you know, the team, about who starts, the goalkeeping positions. I know I've said on the channel before, I've been sick of talking about Raya and Ramsdale because it feels like every day we are. Is there any percentage number that you would put on Arteta starting Ramsdale this weekend after what's happened with Raya?
Oh man. I honestly think it's a 0%, like, to me. I think it's so clearly, I mean, you can see what he wants from Raya, the positioning, right? You can even see from a lot of stats, especially from pass distribution and completion, of what Raya has done. And so, you know, the Raya stuff again, it's again, people picking out, being very selectively attention. Like on the Mudryk cross, people are saying his positioning. I mean, if you know goalkeeper positioning, you're not ever anticipating a mishit cross over your head, right?
Sure. I do think he was kind of too far forwards for that.
That's fair. That's fair. But to say that's the reason for it, where he's anticipating a flat cross, right, across the line, I thought that was great. Even when he punched the ball, of course, it hit the inside of his hand, right? And it goes over, right? But it's funny to me, you have so many people who are normally so outcome-based, right? We're talking about GA is pure outcome-based analysis. But suddenly with Raya, we all want to have context. And like there's a lot of times, you know, a lot of people who don't even go for that ball, right? And that's a tap-in. So I understand. Just Ramsdale, I think, is a key part. He's been a key part of the club, but you can see that Riot, in my opinion, does offer some things that Ramsdale does not, and that's why Mikel has him in there. So I don't see Mikel dropping Riot after that type of match. Just me personally.
Yeah, I don't either. More so because of Arteta's stubbornness than anything else. I just think he's very set in his ways on Raya and wants to be vindicated in that choice. I hope I'm proven wrong. If it was up to you, would you start Ramsdale or Raya?
For me, it's Raya. I love
Yeah.
Aaron, but you have a goalkeeper, I think, in Raya. Clearly, that Mikel thinks offers a few different things that Ramsdale does not, and you're gonna have. Remember, Raya. This is a step up for him too in his career, right? Like this is a level of pressure and microscope he's never played under, and that comes with certain fluctuations in how you're going to play. And I think Mikel has even said, like he's talked about Raya, how one of the things he loves about him is that even when he makes mistakes, it doesn't deter him from keeping on playing like that. Like he understands that's part of the process with it. And that's the only way you get there. Ederson's made some mistakes too, right?
Yeah.
In that regard. And that's just part of that developmental curve. So I think Mikel understands that. Of course, you hope, those mistakes aren't like, blatant killers that lead to goals, right? Of course. But, I think you have to let guys sometimes play through some of those mistakes. And that's the only way you can learn from them.
Without a doubt, without question. I think that I'd like to see Ramsdale start just because there's some ways that if you're going to say all of this about you happy to change the goalkeeper, that we got two great keepers. If one is having these moments of poor form and making these errors, that then you give the other the opportunity to, he's going to play against West Ham in midweek, so give him this game, give him West Ham. I also think that the games that we've played with Raya, if Ramsdale starts these games, do the results change? I don't think so. I don't think the goalkeeper has been a part of the wins and draws and, in the case of Lons, the losses that we've had. I think, yes, he's made mistakes, but as we've talked about, Ramsdale is culpable with mistakes, so they could have happened with him too. So I just think that there is an element of being fair. I don't think I've asked you this, Raj. I know that Sophie's talked very strongly on this because she feels very strongly about this topic, but I felt that as though that Raya should have been the Premier League keeper when he started against Everton onwards, but that Ramsdale should have got the Champions League games. That would have been a fairer way of doing it.
Yeah, I don't think Mikel cares about fair, to be honest. I think he cares about making the team as best as they can, right? And I think he wants to play a very specific way. To me, I thought it would be more matchup dependent, just based on what he thought the opposition would be doing. So when you have, when you have a keeper who's more positionally based, like Raya, he would use him. When maybe it was someone who you might think might require some more shot stopping, you think it might be Ramsdale, right? But then again, you look at the field tilt throughout the season, like neither keeper has had to do much shot stopping.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, in that case, if that's really Ramsdale's main, I think is his main advantage, then is this in the case that you play Raya? So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I think that's why I like getting people on the channel to get different points of view. It's just, yeah, from my view, I'm like, well, you got us into the Champions League again. Ramsdale was a key part of that squad, so I feel almost like it was right to give him that chance, but he's not, and that's down to, and no player is bigger than the club, and arguably no player is bigger than the manager in some ways, either because the manager's got to make the choices. So, yeah, let's wait and see. Sheffield United, though, obviously are the first promoted side that we're playing this season. Our first 9 games included 4 of the other Big 5 teams, Big 6 if you want to call them, but there's obviously 5 of them because we're one of them. First half of the season. Spurs, meanwhile, have played all 3 promoted teams, beaten all of them. Obviously, they narrowly scraped past Sheffield United with that late comeback where they were 1-0 down in the 90th minute and still managed to win. Very typical and annoying. But do you see this as a potential trap game, as it's sometimes described as?
I mean, there's always that potential, but I think the way that we've been playing, with the amount of control we've been playing with, limiting some of those mistakes, on the back line, that like versus Fulham, for example, right? Like the Saka mistake, obviously not. I can't even call it a mistake because he thought Partey would be. There was a miscommunication to me, and so I think we've been more and more limiting those mistakes. If we're able to do that, we should win even if Jesus, is not playing. So and there's always potential for try. I mean, we know in the Premier League what makes it so hard is that it can be difficult week in, week out. You just never know what's going to happen. And so, yeah, there's always potential there. But I just with the team, how the team is playing, the increased focus, for increased confidence, the way you saw them at Sevilla playing the way they did, I would expect this, to be 3 points. I'll never say an easy 3 points because, in my opinion, there's no such thing as easy in the Premier League. So, yeah, but we'll see, of course.
Yeah, we will. They're a side that have drawn 1 game and lost 8. There is nothing other than a win being expected by Arsenal supporters, and quite rightly, because that's what is being expected of. Partey, we don't know whether or not he's going to be fit. He's apparently picked up that slight muscle injury, is what the club have said, going into that game against Sevilla. If he's not fit, and if Jesus isn't fit, I know we've discussed about who we would play, but in midfield, do you go with Jorginho again, or do you bring Havertz in, or do you bring Smith Rowe in? How would you structure the midfield?
I think he goes back to Kai, left center mid, and he plays Declan behind them with Odegaard. I think he wants to vet Kai into that position. To do that, you have to give him reps. I think a team like Sheffield United would be a good team to give him some of those reps. I think the bigger question to me is, does Tomiyasu play, right? Does Tommy play left back?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So that to me is the big question. And I think that addition, something we've seen is Mikel has seen how the right-hand side has been so discombobulated. So playing Tommy in that timber role, right, where he's really getting advanced, has really helped unlock the left side as well. And hopefully that can take that can tilt a defense away from the right-hand side. So they have to play both sides more, which then opens up more space for, Saka, Odegaard, and White. So hopefully that gives a little bit more balance. And I think the way Tommy's playing, I think you have to play him.
Without a question, I think he has to play. The only argument for Zinchenko is that obviously against Sheffield United we're expected to have a lot of the ball, and I suppose that suits Zinny more than going up against a Chelsea that we didn't have as much, and he was exploited for that space in behind. So maybe that's why we might see Zinny. And then if we go to Newcastle the following week, there's no way I want to see Zinny in the starting lineup. It has to be Tommy. That said, and there's actually some interesting things about Newcastle as well. We might, if we get a show next week, we might talk about it in more detail. But obviously, Tonali's ban, Bruno Guimaraes is 1 yellow card away from being suspended. So fingers crossed this weekend he gets a yellow. Isaac is injured. Murphy is injured. Anderson, I think, Elliot Anderson is injured. Obviously, Barnes has been out and he continues to be out for quite some time. They've got a lot of problems, and it's going to be intriguing to see how, if Bruno Guimaraes does get that suspension this weekend, and how Arsenal react to that. I'll be up in Newcastle next week for that game. It's going to be very interesting indeed to see what happens. But yeah, we're going to go into the chat box now for the last 10 minutes of the show to get you guys asking some questions to the doc. Temi says, is Odegaard on fraud watch? I think that's tongue-in-cheek, that question, because certainly he's not. Certainly he's not. I'm actually asking you.
No. I think you already knew the answer.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just plugging in my laptop because it's decided to start dying. It does that if you don't have it charged for a while. John says, how much possession will we have tomorrow? 97, 98 or 99%? I mean, are we in danger of being a little bit too overconfident here?
Yeah, I think it's easy to get overconfident. You never know. I understand the confidence, but like I said, I always try to take every game like, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. So it's that, the Pep mindset. Oh, they're so difficult. Every team.
Man United struggled, to get by them. It's worth pointing out. Austin Trusty, does he start for them? I think I saw a question. The answer is yes. He started against Manchester United in their last game. I'm just seeing if he started against Fulham as well. He did. In a back three. So we could be going up against Austin Trusty tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see if that transpires into something more than what it was. Nobby Pliers says, is Declan Rice worth 300 million yet? He's worth more
Oh
than that,
yeah,
isn't he? Surely.
I would say minimum 400.
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I'm sensing the people are in a funny mood this evening. I'm not getting the most sensible questions in the world. We've kind of touched upon who we play instead of Jesus if he indeed is out. Temi says what would you rather, Raj, a midfielder or a forward in January if you could only choose one?
Well, it depends on the quality, right? We know January is hard to find high quality players, right? Now you're talking about a forward like Osimhen, of course you have to take that, right? But I think a central midfielder, a high quality central mid, I think is still going to be very difficult to find in January, but more likely. Now, all that no context aside, I think it would depend on Partey's gone, right? But for after.
Is he? I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the whole part. Partey's getting now linked with like Juve. I saw this story.
No, I meant he's gone for what's the
AFCON?
AFCON. Sorry. That's what I meant. Now that he's gone, that whole stuff.
He only missed one game last time he went. To be fair, Ghana were knocked out in the group stage, and he came back pretty swiftly. And I think there was a COVID situation, so that meant. But yeah, him and El Neni are both gone. I think Tomiyasu might be gone for the Asia Cup as well. So yeah, there's potential for Arsenal to be without some key players. It's a shame that the game against Liverpool is in December. Otherwise, we were going against Mo Salah. Liverpool without Mo Salah would have been quite good. But plenty of teams are going to be missing some key players for that tournament. So we'll see how it affects us and others, of course. Kai says, is it possible that previous injuries to Gabriel Jesus' knee have had an effect on his current hamstring problem?
I would say in the sense that, whenever you haven't had consistent game time and now you're readapting to having consistent game time, there's always risk for overload. So that's whenever players come back from an injury, doesn't matter short term, but especially if it's more of a longer term injury, I'm always potentially not surprised if they have some knock-on muscular issue just because their body's not adapted yet, right? And you do your best to build in games and to get that player there. But now you're talking about he tweaked the hamstring in a high intensity Champions League match, very likely an intensity level that maybe he hasn't, played all season, right? So kind of like that cup overflows at that point and it leads to some overload. So in the sense that his knee injury directly affected it, I would probably not, but in the sense that it's more of his body just not being 100% at fitness level yet.
Grantley Poos says, Doc, wouldn't you prefer Jorginho holding with Deckers pushing up alongside Odegaard with Martinelli, Eddie and Saka up top? Balance, strength, flexibility against Sheffield.
Yeah, I mean, I want a preference or not. I mean, I would understand why he does it. But again, I think something we said from Mikel with Kai is that he wants to get him used to that position, right? And so games like this, like you said, versus a Sheffield United team that's struggling, to me, could be a great opportunity for that.
And Richard says, how do you think we'll cope with the low block? I'm trying to think the last time we played against a team with a low block, because
it's been a while.
It's been a while, right? Because we've had such a difficult start to the season. We've not played too many teams. Everton, I guess, we were completely in control of that game, even though we won 1-0 and eventually broke them down. We obviously played Brentford, who kept us under the cosh for most of that Carabao Cup fixture. We had Man City, who obviously weren't, Chelsea, who obviously weren't, Manchester United, who obviously weren't either. I'm trying to think of any teams that did play a low block against us this season besides maybe Everton. Can you think of any?
Everton's what comes to mind right away.
Bournemouth, but we won 4-0. So
yeah, I mean it's always the same thing, right? With a low block, I think with typically we'll have early on. We'll have one or two chances, right? If they take it, then the game's over, right?
I guess Lons did a little bit, played on the counter and beat us.
They did. That's for sure. To an extent. And so I always see it. We always create something. It's a matter of if they'll take it or not. And so that's always a question to me. If they take the early chance, it pretty much completely flips the game. So that's kind of the pattern that I've seen.
Well, there was too many games last season at home in particular that we were going up against teams where we were expected to win and win well. I think Bournemouth, I think Southampton, and we gave them early leads. And that's what we have to avoid tomorrow. I keep saying tomorrow. I feel like it's already Friday. On Saturday, that's what we need to avoid. Is giving them an early goal, making a mistake, keep control, keep the pressure on, suffocate them into their own defensive third. That's what we need to try and and do. We are going to wrap things up there. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to the two-man Eat, Sleep, Arsenal, Repeat show today. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Just before we do wrap up, Raj, any progress, any moments or gems of knowledge that you've learned about your personal fitness journey in these past few weeks whilst you've been away?
Let's see, big nuggets. I've been doing some new types of workouts that have destroyed my legs. That's a personal nugget. So like for me, in general, I've always had issues trying to I don't say issue, but getting a quad heavy lower body workout. So I've on this kind of 12, I always do a 12-week program. So I've added some stuff to really focus on my quads. And I did that. And then yesterday I played basketball and it felt like I was, in mud. So, but they're learning, it's all stuff to learn for programming. It's all about figuring out what you can and can't tolerate and then adapting and moving forward.
Absolutely. If you want to join our Strava group, you can. It's www.strava.com/ESARP. Currently, there's 144 members in that group now. It's fantastic to see so many of you joining and keeping up to date with your fitness and telling us what you're doing. Fair play to Stuart, who's done 18 separate activities this week already and 44.1 kilometers gained in distance. To be fair, we've seen Jean-Paul do 110 kilometers this week with 7 activities. I'm assuming that was maybe more biking. It'd be impressive if it wasn't, but very, very impressive indeed. But yeah, fair play. Just having a look at the distance, it is indeed. Scott with 110.8 as well from 5 activities. That's also pretty fantastic. So well done to you guys. We got a little. It is indeed cycling. Just checking their page. But certainly do join that group and make friends, because I see there's a lot of people that have managed to meet up with one another from that group, which is fantastic. I'll be back, of course, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m, bright and early, giving you all the latest Arsenal news and discussing more of your questions. And then, of course, we'll be building up to the game against Sheffield United on Saturday. Arteta's press conference is tomorrow, of course, as well. And then, I'll be at the Emirates on Saturday morning/afternoon, and then have to endure seeing Mike, which is going to be fun. So can't wait for that. Have a fantastic day, morning, evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. And as always, up the Arsenal.